Okay, this time I'm ready for you, Kent. I am getting desensitized to you. There is nothing you can say that will upset me this time.
We're redoing our seminar that I did many years ago. It's going to take me probably 300 years at the rate we're going.
Son of a bitch. I swear he's writing these cold opens for me. So this one is titled Ice Cores. Kent touched on this one a little bit on the Standing for Truth channel, and for time I pretty much glossed over it a bit. Thankfully, he's getting more into it this time, so I get to talk a lot more on the subject. As usual, I've not watched the video, and I will be writing the script for this as I watch. Having said that, again, we will be skipping over his advertisements, but I will, of course, be listening to them just in case he comes up with a nice gem like last time.
We're going to talk tonight about ice core, how they drill down through the ice and get layers. What do they mean?
What do you mean, what do they mean? Drilling through ice and getting layers. They are getting layers of ice. I mean, this ain't fucking rocket science, dude.
How old is the Earth? Well, first of all, we talked about what the Bible says. It clearly teaches about 6,000 years for the age of everything. Universe, stars, everything.
Clearly? You said clearly. Even you had to decipher the Bible to get to your claim of the age of the Earth, for one. For two, shitload of biblical scholars debate over this topic all the time. If it were so clear, there would be no debate, would there? There's the hypothesis that we didn't even get to Adam until the universe was over 6,000 years old. From the Bible, 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 8, saying one day is like 1,000 years. Just that verse alone would make the universe older than you believe if you go by the 6 days plus the 1 day of rest for a total of 7,000. Still others take the book of Genesis as prose and not literal like you. Doing that, there's no global flood. It only seemed global or talked about a large local flood. The creation story would be talking about Big Bang cosmology, and everything in your worldview would have to be scrapped. So not really clearly like you purport. But I digress. We're talking about your particular brand of stupid.
Do ice cores prove the Earth is more than 6,000 years old?
Yep. Some of them are very old indeed if you take up them from places like Antarctica. But I don't want to get too ahead of myself here. I'm only going to clip this talking about the Bible if he says anything insignificant.
So how old is the Earth? Bible says 6,000. The receding moon says less than 1.4 billion. The slowing spin of the Earth we talked about last week can't be billions of years old. Okay? What about ice cores?
Bible's debatable. You don't understand the physics of the moon drifting away. We showed that with part 1b. The slowing spin of the Earth, you barely made an argument for last week, so yeah, you're like 0 for 3 so far. And yes, we get it. The topic is ice cores. If you keep mentioning the topic and avoid talking about it on things, we will proceed like we did last week. And we will be here for 300 years. He repeats himself again with his redundant slides, and you're all wondering how I'm keeping my sanity. Alcohol. Lots of alcohol. That's how. Kent, get on with it.
Many years ago, I was preaching in Denver, Colorado. I decided to go visit the National Ice Core Laboratory. They got a huge laboratory where they store the ice cores. They go to near the South Pole, Antarctica, and to Greenland, and they drill holes in the ice, and they bring up the core that they pull out, like an apple core. They bring up these cores from Greenland and Antarctica with this big coring machine, and they pull them out and they save them in this freezer in Denver. Antarctica.gov.au. Ice core scientists counting ice core layers.
Yeah, I've seen some pictures and video on this facility. It's huge. Truly massive, like a shopping mall for ice. But yes, Kent is on his rare moment where he's telling the truth. I assume that won't last long at all. What they do there is they have this specialized drill to cut deep into the ice in areas where the ice is really, really thick. Antarctica and some parts of Greenland, like you mentioned. Since Antarctica is the world's largest desert, with such a low amount of precipitation, you'd be able to get layers of the ice that are very, very thin, so that when you go further and further down, you get quite a bit of time passing. Whereas in Greenland, it's not nearly as much, but they can tend to cut into the ice closer to the north in the middle of Greenland, where they can get thinner layers because it's close to a desert. Low precipitation and consistently below freezing temperatures instead of further south, where the snow and ice can melt rather quickly. It's due to warmer temperatures and salt when you're near the ocean. Pretty much anywhere on the lower third of Greenland would be a terrible place to get ice cores. Even worse would be near the coast of that area. Two of the main core drilling areas in Greenland are from Camp Century in the north and Summit Camp close to the middle of Greenland. Fascinating stuff, going back over 100,000 years of ice layers, with both well within the Arctic Circle. To put in a little perspective, both camps are further north than the most northern point in Alaska. So really far north. So Kent, what do the scientists say is the signifier on how the ice forms?
They contain annual layers. They're all going to say the same thing. Annual layers. I'm going to have to dispute that.
What Kent is talking about here is the annual snowfall. In a desert-like area like where they take the ice cores, the precipitation is very small. In the summer months and in the winter months, different types of snow will fall in those areas in the rare times that it does. But since we're talking about such cold areas, it rarely ever gets above freezing, so the snow layers start to get compacted as different types of precipitation fall into the area, creating different bands of ice, which create the distinct layers in the compacted ice. I am describing this in as simple terms so even Kent can understand. But suffice it to say, there's not much snow that falls in the places like these, which is why they take the ice cores there.
I'm out of touch, brother. What on earth is a wanker?
Now, this had nothing to do with the topic, but I had to clip it. News flash! You're a wanker, even though you weren't a, wanker. Or maybe you are, and I don't know what you do in your private life. I mean, you and Cindy slept in completely different sides of the house, so one can only imagine. Now, we go on for a little bit. He talks about a mess of nothing until he gets to a debate between Bill Nye and Ken Ham, where he does something I have come to completely expect from Mr. Hovind. Now, this is Bill Nye speaking. The audio is bad. He's playing this on speakers so his mic picks it up instead of cutting the video into his software.
How could it be that just 4,000 years ago, all of this ice formed? Let's just run some numbers.
Well, you can watch the video yourself.
See what he did there? He cut it off just as Bill was about to go through some evidence or an argument in favor of the ice core ages. Well, I love every one of you that watch my videos, and just for you, I found what Bill was about to say, and I could not have said it better myself. Here you go.
How could it be that just 4,000 years ago, all of this ice formed? Let's just run some numbers. This is some scenes from lovely Antarctic. Let's say we have 680,000 layers of snow ice and 4,000 years since the Great Flood. That would mean we'd need 170 winter-summer cycles every year for the last 4,000 years. I mean, wouldn't someone have noticed that? Wow.
You see, this is why I'm making these. Kent Hovind at his finest. He doesn't want his audience to hear that kind of thing. I mean, simple, basic logic defeats his argument with relative ease. Thank you, Bill. You are absolutely amazing. Now, he goes on about annual layers and his primary talking point, so I have a feeling he is going to use this to say something about it. But let's allow Kent to talk a little bit about ice cores.
How far back can ice cores be dated? 800,000 years. Ice cores can tell scientists about temperature, precipitation, atmospheric composition. The thickness of each layer allows scientists to determine how much snow fell during a particular year. Ice cores are cylinders of ice drilled from ice sheets and glaciers. They're essentially frozen time capsules that allow scientists to reconstruct climate. Layers in ice cores correspond to years and seasons, with the youngest ice at the top and the oldest ice at the bottom. Is the thickness of an annual layer of ice smallest at the top or bottom? Or be smaller at the bottom because they get squished with more weight on it.
Yeah, all that tracks, even though it was as repetitive as I just looked. Good job, Kent. Maybe I won't have to do much if you keep this up.
And they got this ice, and it's got definite rings on it. No question. I've seen them. I was in the laboratory, so yeah. They showed me the ice rings. I said, yep, I agree. It has lots of rings, a whole bunch of them.
Huh. Well, I honestly wasn't expecting that. I thought he would deny the ice layers completely, but, okay. Lots of rings. He showed a small section and said there were a lot in just that. Knowing there are kilometers of ice, we're talking about, he just must understand that there's more than just 4,000 layers and more than tens of thousands, since he saw a few feet at most. Okay, I need his evidence. He's brought up a huge amount of evidence against himself. I brought up a little more with Bill, but let's see.
National Avalanche Center. Look at this. Layers of snowpack. Can you see different layers on there? That's one winter's snow. How does it have multiple layers in one winter?
Oh, for fuck's sake. Kent, you are truly a moron. An absolute moron. That is from a mountain with a high snowfall. Ice cores are taken from a desert. Keep in mind, a desert doesn't mean hot and arid. A desert just means very little precipitation. There are frozen deserts. Antarctica is technically a desert. Parts of central and northern Greenland are also deserts. For Darwin's sake, you buffoon, yes, a mountain in a place with a high annual precipitation will have thick snow layers. I mean, even Greenland has a high snowfall in the southern to eastern parts since it's outside the Arctic Circle, while inside the Arctic Circle, the snowfall is leaps and bounds less. How can you live with yourself knowing you have to be intellectually dishonest when you post things like this? He goes on like this for several minutes, talking about mountain avalanches, and these took place in Idaho and Colorado, not Greenland and Antarctica. He proved this by showing pictures provided by Sawtooth Avalanche Center and Crested Butte Avalanche Center. I bet Kent thought he was being so clever in not telling his audience where those two pictures were taken out loud, but he was dumb enough to leave the identity of the centers in the caption. Only took a simple Google search to find out where they are. At this point, I am expecting Kent to lie. Constantly. I am shocked more when he tells the truth.
Snow melt on a warm day will refreeze later, making a layer of clear ice. How many of you have ever lived somewhere where it got above freezing in the daytime and below freezing at night? You ever been there? So you could get 7 of these layers in 1 week, couldn't you?
And I bet not a single one of you lives in Antarctica year-round, and not one of you lives in the middle of the Greenland ice sheet. Well, maybe one, but I don't think my reach is that far out just yet. Subscribe and share. Help me get my video seen in Antarctica. I know, I am shameless.
In Greenland and Antarctica, where the weather is consistently dry and very cold, the glaciers are miles thick, but the annual rings are very thin. The deepest cores can measure 10,000 feet. Cores from Greenland, drilled since 1990, show the northern climate was erratic 135,000 years ago.
Exactly. Thank you for debunking yourself. Maybe I should just let you talk more often. This is why you cannot trust someone like Kent Hovind. He will cherry pick anything he can to try to make his point valid. You hear how he's jumping between high precipitation areas and deserts to try to dissuade people?
In 1943, one of the squadron of airplanes from America was flying over to join the war, and they got caught in a storm, had to turn around, and they crash landed in Greenland. Just Google the Lost Squadron, P-38, discovered under 300 feet of ice in Greenland. The Lost Squadron aircraft. There's where they come skidding in on the ice. Okay, nobody died. They were all survived. 9 days later, they were rescued. This find an exciting piece of history, to say the least, but the search doesn't end with the P-38. There are still 6 undiscovered aircraft that are part of the Lost Squadron, and many additional World War II aircraft went down over the same patch of Greenland as they flew between the United States and the European theater. 20 miles or so from the Lost Squadron at Kogi Bay in Greenland, the team continues to search for their primary target, a Coast Guard Grumman J-2F Duck, believed to still have the remains of 3 airmen in sight.
I bet you're wondering why I clipped that. Honesty. And it's Kent ruining his own argument again. Kogi Bay was hard to locate exactly since it wasn't on the Google Maps, but I did find it using references from other maps. It's along the southeast coast of Greenland, where the climate is much wetter and warmer than where the cores are taken. In other words, lots of snow, lots of melt. It's located at 64.976 degrees north and minus 40.934 degrees west if you want to plug it in on your maps. This is why the squadron landed there. Softer snow, easier landing so that they could be rescued. Since the snowfall is much higher in the areas along the coast and melts happen regularly, the planes were able to be buried in over 260 feet of snow due to the dramatically different conditions in the area compared to the north and the center part of Greenland, where the ice is solid and the chance of rescue would be remote. So Kent's debunk has been debunked with maybe 15 minutes of searching. I already guessed this would be a southern coastal area. But to be even more damning, to put it into perspective, his argument here on the Lost Squadron compared to where they take the ice cores is it's the equivalent of saying the weather in central Wisconsin is the same as the weather in central Alabama. Greenland is huge.
Deeper ice is pressed into finer layers, so 4,400 years is plenty to accumulate all that ice at the poles.
Correction. It's the equivalent of saying the weather in central Wisconsin is the same as the weather in Mexico City, Mexico. My bad. He barps out a bunch of hypotheticals about the ice and the plane, which really mean nothing, and talks about heavy snowfall in various parts of the United States, which is a false equivalency fallacy. Now, Kent is going to tell us all about how he thinks the ice layers formed. Get ready for this shit. I'm clipping it down a lot since this took him like 6 minutes to get out. I'm going to drop it down to less than 2. This is long, but it's totally worth it. Just thinking about the mental gymnastics he would have had to go through to get this conclusion out sounds like something a 4-year-old would conclude.
Better theory about how the thousands of ice rings got there. Today's atmosphere above us is about 40, 50 miles thick. We live at the bottom of the ocean of air. You go up a few miles and it gets really cold. I believe there used to be a seventh layer, a layer of water or ice above the atmosphere, like the Bible says. At about 6 miles up, and again at 50 miles up, it's 100 below zero right now, no matter where you are. Earth's atmosphere has many layers: thermosphere, exosphere, ionosphere, mesosphere, troposphere. There used to be a seventh layer. I believe there was a crystalline canopy around the world, probably just 10 miles above the surface, squeezing all the air into 10 miles. This canopy might have been held up by like a big inflatable building. Even air pressure everywhere, a sealed canopy all the way around, could have been held up by the Earth's magnetic field. A super cold ice is magnetic. It might have been both. Super cold ice becomes magnetized. There was a layer of ice above the atmosphere, a flattened solid surface. On the second day, he made the firmament, the crystal stretched over the heads of the Hayat. He made it to crystallize into a solid. The firmament not more than 3 fingers thick. So whatever it was, there was a canopy of ice up there, held up by the Earth's magnetic field and maybe air pressure or a combination of both. In the 600th year of Noah's life, the fountains of the great deep broke up. The fountains of the deep broke open. There used to be water under the crust of the earth. That went shooting up, which shooting up under high pressure with 10 miles of rock on top would give it 60,000 psi, pounds per square inch, 30 tons per square inch, would shoot rocks up and shatter this canopy. Shattered pieces of the ice canopy would be sucked into the North and South Pole because of their magnetic. So the canopy gets shattered at the beginning of the flood. All this snows down at the North and South Pole.
Sorry. I was getting so bored of the bullshit that I made some noise. I had to remove my audio. But what can we take from this? Here. Kent is one lack of a curve away from the lowest form of human life on the planet. Let's see. Iron ore on the surface would be gone. Shut up to the poles if Earth's magnetism is strong enough to pull on ice for several thousand miles without it ever hitting ground. It would have to be strong enough to yank any ferrous metals on the ground or that were made into tools, and it would still be that strong today. But Kent is okay with planes not getting force pushed to the poles when they are up in the air. It's almost like he has no idea what he is talking about. What am I saying? It's not even close to rational thought. Everyone in the room is now dumber for having listened to it. I am so glad this one's over. I am Corsi, and this is the Fluffy Atheist. If you like the video, thumbs up. If you don't, thumbs down. Help me out by sharing this with your friends if you want to share a funny video, or you want to point and laugh. I'm good either way.